You're listening to the local glow.
Champaign-Urbana, Chambana, home of the Moro Plots, Ebertfest, American football, the band, and my alma mater. Champaign-Urbana is a quirky 200-something resident town in central Illinois where there's quite a bit going on. The education is excellent, the food is delicious, the winters are brutal, and the music is continually making waves. My name is Tarek Shahada, and this is The Local Glow, an independent podcast production out of Chicago, Illinois, where we dig into local music around the Midwest and what makes it tick. Today we'll be discussing some of the changes going on in Champaign-Urbana's local scene as it adapts to cultural shifts and takes steps to delve deeper into its own DIY approach to music. We'll be speaking with Boswell Hutson, a booker / promoter / friend of mine from our college days. Boz works on shows in and around Chambana, helps book for the annual Pygmalion Festival, and is a regular face in the local music community. He's originally from Monticello, Illinois, an even smaller town nearby, and moved to Champaign-Urbana for school. In fact, we lived in and worked at the same residence hall briefly. He was a desk clerk and I was an RA. He and I had the chance to meet up one unusually warm winter afternoon in Urbana, where we talked outside for a while, hence the noise, or should I say the cool 3D ambient sound space, right? We got to talking about local music, and I asked him how he got started booking shows.
But yeah, so kind of how I got started with music, I just kind of started getting really into Chicago hip-hop and Twitter and just trying to interact with these dudes. And, between my freshman and sophomore year, just kind of decided oh shit, I can throw a show. How hard is that? I'll email the guy from Canopy and email some of these rappers that I've been interacting with on Twitter. And the first show that I ever did was Chance the Rapper. And in 2012, he still follows me on Twitter. Yeah, back in 2012, I did Chance's, I think it was his second show in town. I think he played Cowboy Monkey before that, but it was over the summer at Canopy Club. There were probably 60 or 70 people there. He brought 40 people down on a bus and sold them t-shirts as part of an inclusive ticket thing. But that kind of got my foot in the door with helping out to throw shows, and then started booking my own stuff. Booked a lot of rappers that are now big. Joey Perp, Saba, if you know him from the city. Just kind of trying to create a pipeline to bring the Chicago hip-hop scene down here. And, it was easier for me because in 2012, when I was a kid on Twitter, everyone else was also just a kid on Twitter. Saba was just a kid on Twitter that you could hit up and be hey, I have this room, want you to come down and play a show. And it was a really good intro into kind of doing all aspects of the booking process.
Once Boz was able to get his foot in the door, he was ready and excited to engage with the local scene, booking and producing shows around town at multiple venues, as well as throwing house parties and shows of questionable legality, right in that sweet spot where DIY music often finds itself. He also started booking for the Chambana-based indie rock band Terra Terra, one of my personal favorite artists from the city right now. But over the years, he just started getting really good at what he was doing. I remember growing up in Rockford, Illinois, playing in my post-hardcore Under Oath fan club band. Things were very different from Champaign over there. Almost every show that we ever played in town was DIY. We played house shows and in the basements of shady churches or mysterious lodges, warehouses, or garages. There's never really been any reliable, quality venues in Rockford for indie music, so when I moved to Champaign, I was a bit out of my element. I was shocked to be asked to play in dedicated venue spaces, like the Mike and Molly's Upper Room, the glamorous stage of the Accord, or the divey but always fun Canopy Club front room. For a pretty small town, the number of exciting but accessible performance spaces in Champaign-Urbana has been the envy of comparable cities around the region. As a result, the need for consistent and developed DIY infrastructure hasn't really been much of a concern for most local bands. However, things seem to be changing.
we're at such a weird place with venues right now. There are really only 2 venues in town that regularly book shows anymore, so it's very, it's kind of forced my hand and forced a lot of people's hands here in town into exploring the DIY scene a little bit more. When I started, it was just venues, just like almost exclusively Canopy Club. And as I've spent more time in Champaign and as the scene has changed, it's become more apparent that, the DIY thing is very important. It's integral, and especially to a scene like Champaign, it's kind of necessary. I think the biggest, there are a couple problems with Champaign and its lack of venues. For one, where a lot of other college towns have like a centralized campus in downtown, like Bloomington, Indiana, or Ann Arbor, like the downtown and the campus kind of butt up to one another. But here in town, we have 3 separate nodes. We have Urbana, campus, and Champaign. They're all separated by a mile. So there are 40,000 kids on campus who are into live music, who don't even know that downtown Champaign exists, or like don't want to take the 5-minute bus ride, God forbid, to get over there. So we're kind of at a logistical, like geographical disadvantage. And then just, in order to have a music scene, you kind of have to have a wealthy benefactor or multiple wealthy benefactors who own buildings and are willing to give it to a space for musicians, and might not necessarily see a huge return on their investment. And I totally get it. It's not necessarily sound business to support a venue in a small town like this, but you kind of need someone who's willing to pay it forward for the arts, especially in a small town like this. So we're kind of disadvantaged in a lot of ways, but those are the 2 that kind of stick out the most to me. So we've seen Mike and Molly's close, which was a crucial small room. We've seen the Accord close. They just announced they're closing on April 30th. So now really the only things downtown are Cowboy Monkey and like Clark Bar, kind of, if you even count that. They don't even book regular shows.
It's been tough to see these key spots shut down over recent years, and it's taken a toll on the music community. These places were integral, essential for local bands who were looking for a stage to share the music that they had put their hearts into. Anyone could get a show at these spots, and each would receive the warm welcome of the accessible support system that the venues represented. But when the infrastructure of a lively scene like that of Champaign-Urbana gets shaken, everyone in town can feel it. And that's what happened. For a number of reasons, things started to shift, and several great performance spaces started to close their doors across town. As a result, there aren't as many shows going on lately, simply because there's just not as many places to host shows anymore. And it can be tough for small bands looking to make some headway, because the best venues just don't have much space for the little guys right now. But when life gives you lemons and your favorite spots shut down, you've got to make some DIY lemonade. So these days, Champaign is looking to the underground because DIY music is great, but really mostly because it's necessary. And the town is certainly tough enough to weather these times, but it's a tough transition to make.
It's a totally different ballgame, playing to like 30 people in a basement where you're like playing for donations is very different than playing a festival for a guarantee. But it's the same in the sense that there's a crowd there that is interested in live music and wants to ingest it. So like that's ultimately what we're chasing. So it's a net positive, because the house venue or house venues here in town they're good at bringing people together for live music, which is just baseline what we need. But it is different than a venue show, and I think personally, just from where I'm coming from, I probably prefer venue shows, just because it's easy to have that rigid pay structure. But the DIY thing here, it's kind of like I said, our hands been forced, and it's a good thing. Blips and Chits, which is like it's like a house venue near downtown. They've been really doing great things, and like they've kind of stepped up and filled a necessary void that has been closed since Mike and Molly's went down, since I4C went down, and since the Accord went down. It's become kind of like the go-to place for local bands, and until we get someone who's willing to invest in a space and like pay the rent and utilities on a space, that's what it's going to have to be, I think. And it's like I said, it's not bad. It's a net positive.
The community is rallying around the good music and the heart of the local scene, and they're adapting and taking pitches as they come. But changing focus from actual formalized venue shows to DIY spaces isn't just logistical. It can also include fundamental changes to the way things work and the way the community engages. And that can be intimidating to showgoers, especially folks who are new in town.
It is a slightly different crowd, and kind of, I don't know. I saw in one of Isaac Arms' Facebook statuses, someone said, it's important to note that a lot more people feel comfortable in a venue setting just because it's like a more public place. It's not like a basement, it's not, I don't know, there are more rules, I guess, a lot more checks and balances. But not to say that like the crowds that go to house shows are shady. They're not. They're great people. They're music lovers. They're there for the music. They're not there to like get away with something they couldn't get away with at a venue. But the crowds, I think it does like intimidate some people and drive some people away. Or not even necessarily drive people away, but people wouldn't go there that would go to a show at Mike and Molly's. Or like people won't go to this house where you have to message for the address because they can't post it because it's illegal. So it's just easier, I think, on concert goers to be able to go to a venue. So if anything, I think the crowds are maybe a little bit smaller. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just, kind of making a regulated system. Blips and Chits has done a really good job of making sure all of their shows are announced. They announce them. They make a Facebook event for everything. There's a system. It's rigid. And that's good. Kind of building that infrastructure makes it seem more legit than just like a house party in someone's basement. And so I really applaud what they're doing at that house venue for the DIY scene and how they're kind of regulating it and making it legit to kind of tying back to my previous point, just bringing more people in, making more people feel comfortable. I think that's kind of how they're coping with it, and it seems to be working. I don't know. It's kind of nice when there's a system in place and shows are advanced and Facebook events are made and promoted. It's encouraging to see that. That's always the hardest part.
In just a minute, we'll hear about how Champaign's hip-hop scene is faring these days, as well as how you can get involved and play a show in town. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is the Jester, folk punk artist out of the Chicago area, and you're listening to The Local Glow, an independent podcast production out of Chicago, Illinois. You can listen to every one of our episodes and find show notes and more online at discovermusic.com/thelocalglow. Or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thelocalglow. We're brand new and are still trying to get the word out about this podcast, so please give us a like if you enjoy what you hear, and please tell your friends. Interested in joining our production team or being featured on a future episode? Let us know by emailing us at thelocalglow@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
Boz is a big fan of hip-hop, if you couldn't tell. I asked him how the local hip-hop scene in Champaign-Urbana is doing and how they're coping with the changing infrastructure. Here's what he had to say.
Definitely, it's been a bright spot. In a area where I guess you could argue that the local scene is maybe at its lowest point in quite a while, just in terms of lack of venues and bands moving away or breaking up, stuff like that. The hip-hop scene has actually been like a rare bright spot, which is weird because Champaign's hip-hop has always been underwhelming to me. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have been around longer than I have who have seen it better. But like in college and stuff, it always seemed, kind of weak. And the local hip-hop shows always had like, I don't know, maybe like 20 people in attendance. But lately, it's just been, it's been phenomenal. There are a lot of local rappers like Chase Baby and Truth aka Trouble. They're like a duo called Trouble Chasin'. They've kind of made Canopy Club like a center, a mecca for local hip-hop. In that front room even, like taking a space and kind of making it their own, and that's super commendable. And in turn, they've, created a realm for other MCs to come up. So like people like OG Temple that wouldn't have had a platform before can now, are being booked on shows at Canopy every month, or like playing open mic night every Monday, putting in the work necessary to build a following so you can have your own shows and kind of cultivate a scene. And that's like, I think hip-hop in Champaign right now is leapt past like indie rock in terms of how much excitement there is, how much fresh new content there is, and people that are pushing and marketing themselves regularly and efficiently and stuff like that. And then there's CJ too, CJ Run, and they're like, I don't know, head and shoulders above every hip-hop act I've seen come out of Champaign before. They use, very progressive beats and music that is like something that you would hear in like a dance club in Europe and not in Champaign. So it's unlike anything I've ever heard come out of Champaign before, and it's really exciting to see what they're going to do. So yeah, there's a lot of potential in the hip-hop scene right now, even in terms of just like, not necessarily like people that will see huge national success, but in terms of like cultivating their own scene where they can support each other and bring people out to shows. And that's how it starts, that's how it grows. You have to start from the bottom and build up kind of like a grassroots following. And they've done a phenomenal job over the past year or so. It's really been good. They found a hole and they really wedged themselves in there, and they're doing great.
Before leaving him to enjoy what was left of his lunch break, I had one last question for Boz. I asked something all you listeners in bands are probably wondering. How can out-of-town artists get involved in Chambana's scene and book a show?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes with like, I do this when I try to book shows out of town for Terra Terra and stuff like that. But because things in Champaign are so kind of in limbo right now, kind of up in the air, it's really important to do your homework, link up with the right musicians that fit what you're going to do but are also going to bring a few heads to the room. It's hard to articulate this without being too negative. It's hard to have a good show in Champaign. It's hard to have a room with even 100 people. It's monumentally tough. And it's a lot of times it's just who you're paired with and how long it's been since they've played a show, and are their friends going to come out that night? It's a toss-up in a lot of ways. If you're looking to come to Champaign, study up with who you want to play with, send them a message, get to know them, and then try to put a bill together. And honestly, a house venue might be the way to go. DIY might be the way to go for touring acts in Champaign right now, just simply because the small rooms we have are Cowboy, the front room of Canopy, and that's it. So if you really want intentful, I think I just made that word up, but if you want very close listeners, people that are actually going to enjoy the music and be open to a touring band who they're not going to know their songs, I think honestly right now DIY is the way to go in Champaign. Like I said earlier, I almost prefer venues, but I'm also realistic, and I know that we're in a very weird, down time right now, and if I were a touring band coming through Champaign, I would do the house thing, do the DIY thing.
Even though Champaign-Urbana's music community is working through some tough times right now, it remains an ideal tour stop in central Illinois. If you're looking for a show between Chicago and Indianapolis or St. Louis, Chambana is just about smack dab in the middle. It's a great community to support and to get to know, and they've really got some great things going on. Now, since recording this interview with Boz, a lot of things have happened. I've had the opportunity to speak with a couple more key players in the Champaign-Urbana music scene, both Seth Fine, the co-president of the Nicodemus Agency, executive producer of the Pygmalion Festival, and publisher of Smile Politely, as well as Guido Esteves of First Gig Rock Camp, which you'll hear more about another day, SCP Studios, and Red Hot Productions, which is the group who is taking over the Accord now that they've closed their doors. Seth has been running booking at the Accord for a while now, and fortunately for all of us, he'll continue contributing his booking talents with the new venue taking its place, a top-notch local event center called 51 Main. Guido shared with me some of his team's grand vision for this new space, and I've got to say, I'm pretty excited for all that they've got in store. He told me that they plan to keep bringing fantastic music through 51 Main, carrying on the legacy of the Accord as a key destination for indie music in central Illinois. Additionally, though, they'll be expanding the scope of the venue to include a broader range of musical experiences, live drama productions, performance art, and even weddings. Guido also told me about a brainchild that they're working on that involves rock and roll, beer, and church. Hopefully we'll be able to get more on that in a future episode. Now, I wish I could communicate to you the energy and excitement in Guido's voice as he told me about all the passion they're hoping to pour into the local community through this new space. His team at Red Hot Productions is hoping to invigorate the local scene, get the university campus involved, and bring good and even experimental art to the town. This space certainly won't be the answer to all the needs of a small town adapting to a new age of local music, and because of its size and production level, it won't fill the shoes of the smaller venues in the area, which have closed in recent times. But it could be a key shot in the arm to keep the town's collective chin up. They don't have a website for the new space just yet, but they should have one soon, so keep an eye on the show notes for a link. At any rate, the Champaign-Urbana scene continues its paradigm shift as it looks to the community instead of the local market to house its art. We'll be documenting their efforts, learning from their challenges, and celebrating their successes with them. And if you got a story to share about this town's art community, whether good, bad, or hilarious, we'd love to hear about it. Email us at thelocalglow@gmail.com. We'll be producing more episodes about the goings-on over there, so stay tuned and check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/thelocalglow or on our website at thelocalglow.libsyn.com, where you can find show notes and more. And of course, please pick up your phone and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcasting app. It'll make all of your wildest dreams come true. Today's episode was recorded and produced by me, Tarek Shahada, and featured original music by Champaign's own Austin Duncan of the project Snayl, as well as Chicago folk band Discoverer. Interested in joining the Local Glow's production team or social team, or in featuring your work or story on a future episode? Get in touch with us by emailing thelocalglow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.